everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Family Matters podcast. My name is Courtney Moore-Lyle, and we are here with Sister Hope Moore and Brother Ruben Davis. And today on our show, we're going to be discussing intentional parenting. So I'd like to welcome them to our Family Matter podcast today. So welcome, you guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey,
Come on. Yes. How was your day today?
everything's good around here. How you doing, lady?
Yeah, it was good. It was a great day.
Good, good. So I really wanted to invite you all on our show today to discuss a matter that has really been an issue, I think, for parents in general. You know, we're just having a hard time with our kids today, and so how to be an intentional parent is what I really wanted your expertise and your thoughts, and to kind of help, maybe drop some nuggets for parents to be able to grasp and take those tools back for to their homes. So I want to start by saying, or asking, what do you think intentional parenting is? When you think about being an intentional parent, both of you are parents. I'm a parent. I have a 15-year-old son. That's wild to say 15 because he just turned 15 in January. What do we think an intentional parent is? Like, what does that mean to you? We'll start with you, Sister Hope.
When I think of being an intentional parent, I kind of think of knowing what the end goal is that you want for your child. What are the things that when your kid is grown that you want them to accomplish or to have accomplished? And so to me, being intentional means that I'm starting when they're young, laying that foundation with them so that when they're grown, they reach those goals.
Right. Kind of like just, making thoughtful decisions. So you kind of have a plan, we're thinking about the, temporary sacrifices for the long-term gain. Like we have a
Absolutely.
long-term plan, development, that well-being of the child, trying to make sure that, our decisions just aren't quick, but they are intentional, but really long-term. Right.
Yeah, long term. And I will say, I'm the mother of three adult children, and I had, I think, 3 or 4 goals for them. And so the intentionality was that this is what I want them to, this is the adult that I want them to be. So in order to get them to that adulthood or that place, that meant that I had to do certain things along the way.
Absolutely. And Brother Ruben, what are you thinking about intentional parenting?
Right, right. First of all, I have to back up to say I like that, we're jumping in on the topic of intentional parenting. Just highlighting that there may be other kind of parenting. Sometimes the parenting is uh I guess easily unintentional. Maybe you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, which all of us probably feel like we're doing anyway at times. And then I think, there's, I don't know, to me, this topic is just something that's most likely timeless, like that we all, need to be that hands-on type of parent. Whether we know what intentional parenting is or not, that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of it. I think of hands-on parenting, being present, and observing, knowing your child, knowing when they're sick, or knowing when they're down, or knowing when something is just off, and knowing when you need to jump in and be there and be active, have that plan. And so I like that Sister Hope just mentioned that, when she was raising her 3, that there was always an idea down the road of what you were trying to get to. I really love that. And as I have my 2 boys that I'm raising, I just remember, well, what, so they constantly get this, that I'm raising men, and maybe one day, husbands, maybe one day fathers, but I'm raising men, not boys. And I've heard that say me before as a child, but I'm reminding myself the same thing, that I have to be intentional with how I'm raising them, because I'm not raising them to be forever boys. I'm raising them to one day be men. So intentional parenting is the work we're going to put in on that.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that, because parenting, oftentimes we make plans, but parenting doesn't come with a manual, right? Our plan changes. We can have a plan, but that plan might change, right, as our child grows, right? The plan that I may have set for my son isn't, the principles are the same, but the plan adjusts, and maybe the approaches change, and maybe the way that I handle certain situations change. And so as we go through this and we're having these conversations, I think it's important for parents to be encouraged to know that, parenting doesn't come with a set manual. And so it's okay if what we say here, on this talk today isn't necessarily exactly what you're doing, right, as a parent, because we all have different children, different needs, and what reaches mine may not reach yours, but we just want to make sure that whatever plan we are setting and whatever way that we are moving towards, it's something that's intentional. It's something that is, has a strong spiritual foundation, and something that is really kind of catered towards building that child, and as a parent kind of giving yourself some, some room to grow, to say, hey, like, I really am doing the best I can. I messed that up, maybe I just need to keep
Right,
working it, right? It's okay to switch up the plan, is what I'm
right.
thinking.
And Miss Courtney, I think it's like sometimes your methods have to change, but there are
Mhm.
certain principles that
Mhm.
never do. And to me, when I think about intentional parenting, there are some principles like being present, being consistent, you know,
Mhm.
being empathetic. There's some principles that carry no matter what your method is. There's certain principles that you have to make sure that you always have with whatever your method is as you're parenting.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Something Courtney said about how it's going to be different for all of us.
Mhm.
Man, I bet you, Sister Hope, you can probably say that. Yeah, raising three, it was different from every child, and you probably had the principle, overarching, for your household. But I know when I look at my two boys, I try to mimic what I started with the first one, and what I try to do with the second one, ends up being completely wrong. I'm like, okay, can't do that same thing. So it has to, from child to child. They're just
That's
so
the
different. Yeah.
And when you're raising just one, you almost feel like I got to get this right?
Hmm.
You don't have an opportunity to really learn.
Hold on. What do you mean? What do you mean? Like, hey, I got this one. Like,
Yeah,
we
I
got
have this one. Yeah, like, with me being a single
pressure.
parent with one child, you don't
Yeah.
have the opportunity to really adjust and learn
Mm.
from this one to get it right with the second, or,
Mm.
or get it right with the third, right? Or the first boy or the first girl. Well, I got this girl I learned from this one so I can, give this to that one. It's
Wow.
difficult. And so it's really, I just believe that you have to trust that everything that you're doing in an intentional way, but it's
Mhm.
always with the best intention, or the best, uh, with the child in mind. Like, you're giving your best effort every time. I may not always get it right, but I'm moving in a way that I know that I made this decision
Mm.
intentionally with your best interest in mind. I genuinely was giving my best effort, right, of what I thought was right. And that's okay. As a parent, there are a lot of times you sit back, you're like, man, like, did I get that right? I didn't get that right. I mean,
Mm.
that leads us right into what Sister Hope was saying, is like, what are the core principles of intentional parenting, right?
Mm.
How do you be consistent as a parent when everything around us is changing? Everything. Like, I mean, schools are changing, schedules are changing, friend sets are changing, your relationship as parents are changing, right? Like, as your children are growing, your relationship with your spouse isn't the same. or maybe you're going through a transition of going through a divorce. And so, how do we remain intentional parents when we're really, going through transitional phases? Like, how does that work? You know, you know.
Yeah. I feel, well, I don't want to go off of just how I'm feeling. I want to make sure that we're all reading from the same book here. So, out of the work that we've done before with parents, we picked up books and resources, and I tried to give myself the little acronym based on some information we had. PCEGG, PC egg. So I'll read it though.
PC egg.
PC egg. Don't be a little PC egg. But it's presence, consistency, empathy, guidance, and growth mindset, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
good. That's
We
good.
all got that one. We all got that one. You guys already know this stuff because we've been all working with the same resource. So, but presence, being fully engaged and attentive to your child.
Mhm.
Consistency, establishing and maintaining routines and expectations. Man, and routines, I didn't even really truly understand how important routines are.
Important.
And
Yes.
my God, okay, yeah. We'll get into that. But empathy, another big one. Understanding and validating your child's feelings. Guidance, providing direction and support while allowing for independence. And then growth mindset, encouraging continuous learning and development. So all of those are happening if you're going to be using, if you want the core principles for intentional parenting, right?
Mhm.
Man, I feel like we need to pick that one apart a little bit, but I don't. But you're running this. This is your show.
Well, I really like how you paused with validating feelings because I feel like in today's world, a lot of our kids, all of them are growing up in a era where they want to know why, right?
Yeah.
You can't just tell them you're going to do this. They
Yeah.
want to understand why. And I think a part of being like an intentional parent is understanding that times have changed, right? This traditional, you're
Mm,
going to do what I said you're going to do because I said you're going to do it, isn't really working for the kids that we're raising right now. And if we want them to grow up, we talked about long-term goals of how we want them to be. If we want them to grow up and be intentional about their jobs or be advocates for themselves in schools or leadership, or right now I'm working with my son and leading an initiative at his high school. Well, I want him to be an advocate for himself. Well, I can't expect him to do that if he doesn't ask questions to why or how. And so, but that also has to happen at home, right? So we
mhm,
have to give them a
mhm,
space to share their feelings in a respectful way, right?
mhm,
But share their feelings and hear like when they feel a certain way. We have to be open to understanding that our kids cannot be parented the way that we were parented, growing
Absolutely.
up. Times have
mhm.
changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sister Hope, did you want to add something? Oh, go ahead.
That empathy one, I paused on that one because also to me that one was the one that really says that's where you evaluate
Mm,
how you doing. That's where you you have to stop in order to uh be in their shoes, in order to see what see your child and validate how they're feeling and everything like that. You have to stop. You can't move. You can't just give them the ordinary. You have to stop and really see if okay, what I say to them really help them, or really did it actually hurt them? And
Absolutely.
then after that, now it's time to either adjust your parenting or something like that. To me, that is part of, I think that's where it turns into true intentional parenting somehow. And without that, I don't know how it all works. But yeah, all of it as well, the presence, the consistency, the empathy, the guidance, the growth. I think all of that works together.
Yeah,
hmm
it does. I think it's important that we allow kids to use their voice. and we allow them to have a voice. I mean, when I was growing up, you did it because I said do it. We didn't have a voice.
Mm,
And so I think it's important to note parenting is changing a lot, and kids do want a voice, and a good parent will allow them a space where they can share their voice. But I think it is important that that voice is respectful. But I think also that parents have to understand too. You can't just talk to your child any kind of way and then expect your child to be respectful back to you. You
mm,
get respect by giving respect. And so I think that's important. And that thing about being present, every child is different. You can have a set of twins, and those twins will be different. You have to parent them differently. And that's that thing about knowing, being present with your child, knowing what turns them on, knowing what turns them off. You really have to be present. And one thing I think is important is consistency, especially when it comes to routines, discipline.
mm,
That's important that you be consistent. Don't say it if you don't mean it. And
mm,
not and don't just think about, is this really going to teach my child about why this was a bad choice? So that you can guide them to making a better choice, not just giving out a punishment, just to be giving out a punishment, but helping them to learn that, hey, this is why this was harmful, and helping them to understand that. I think that's important so they can grow from it and understand why they don't repeat that behavior again. Not because they're scared of you or scared they're going to be on punishment, but that they learn from that behavior. I think that's really critical.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Courtney, I actually had a question for you, really, because when you brought that up about children and how they are now, I have my ideas, but why do you think children or this generation, need more answers? Why do you think it's like that?
I think they're just exposed to more. They're growing up with social media and seeing a lot more. They have a lot more access to information than we did. We grew up, in school passing notes, or, having conversation, conversing with our friends. And, we saw our friends at recess. These babies are on their phones. They're looking at any and everything. And it's not all negative. Some of it's good information. Sometimes, they really want to understand, why did this happen? They're not just settling for, oh, this happened and that's just the end of it. They want to understand the why. And it's important for them to process the why, because even when you put a child on punishment, right, they start to get a certain age, they want to understand, well, why, right? Why is this a necessary punishment for what I did? Or they will call you out and say, well, you did this. Now when I was growing up, if I called out somebody, that you didn't do that. But
Mm-mm.
now times have changed so much. I just think that they have a level of ownership for their thoughts and their feelings that we just did not have because of the access to the information that they have. Also,
Yeah.
I think parents, unfortunately, our family structure is a lot, it looks different. It's the norm of our family structure is broken, right? You see a lot more single parents, and so you have parents that are actually having more conversations with their children. That when I was growing up, your conversation was with your spouse, right? You didn't talk around your children. You didn't have conversations. Children weren't interrupting, or a lot of times now you have a lot of moms or dads that are trying to figure some things out, and they don't have a space to do that with someone else. And so that child is in the space of the no. And
Wow.
so if you're doing that as they're growing up, when they get a certain age, they're very protective, and they want to understand, why is this happening? Why is this the consequence? Or why was this handled this way? They have a different level of knowledge when it comes to just the
Mm,
world around them, their home life, their access to information. And which brings me, as we're talking about this conversation, Sister Hope brought up, something that we call reactive parenting or quick fix parenting, right?
Mhm.
Where, just being intentional means you're not just throwing something out there to kind of maybe get them to go away or to have a quick fix to something that they've done wrong. And I think that that's something that as parents, we're all guilty of, especially when it comes to being frustrated and giving out a punishment. How do we handle quick fix parenting? I think that it's very easy to be in the moment and be frustrated and then give out or say something that we don't mean, and then we have to walk it back, right? But instead of walking it back and owning it and really saying, hey, I really didn't get that right. I messed that up. That punishment wasn't fair to you. I should have thought that through before. I said that. We just let them do what they want to do, and then it causes a larger issue, right? Because we're not owning what we did. How do we be intentional um when we're upset? Or how do we become intentional when we're going through a rough time and we
Mm.
don't become reactive with our parenting? I think that's a good segue into the next part of like what we want to talk about. So, what do you all think about that?
Oh, Sister Hope, you want to go first?
Well, I'm just going to say quick fix parenting. Like you said, we're all guilty of it. And that
Right.
is you are just doing something to stop the behavior. You're not
Mm.
teaching a lesson. You're not, all you're doing is the kid is acting up. So just give them what they want so they will stop. But that really just feeds that monster of them repeating that behavior again because they know that if I keep this up long enough, mom's gonna get tired, she's gonna give in, and she's gonna give me what I want. And
Mhm.
that's not, we don't want to do that.
Oh, but it's also not just giving them what they want sometimes. Sometimes it's quick fix. I'm gonna pop them on their head or hand or behind, and we'll stop that. We'll stop what they're doing, but now they don't even know what it is that they were even
They don't know
doing.
what they were doing.
They don't know what they were doing. They just know they got a punishment, and they'll probably be right back at it some point. But yeah, yeah, they get no long term, information out of that.
Mhm.
So
I
I
think
what you're
that's
saying.
a good point. And I think like one thing, like, I have a teenager now. So it's a different, it's a beast, is what I will say. One thing that I think that with teenagers is in the moment I'm learning to say, hey, what are you doing right now? Right? Why are you getting ready to be on punishment? Why is that phone getting ready to be in my hand? Right? And it makes you stop and it makes them stop, right?
Mm, mm,
And say, okay, well, yeah, I'm being disrespectful or I'm letting my mouth go, right? But it also allows you as a parent to say, okay, let me take a breath, right? Because once you put them on punishment for that weekend, your weekend is gone too. You have to, you have to like you are on punishment too, and that's hard. Yeah,
Yes.
mm,
that's hard. Um,
But thinking of that, you've got to be consistent because
mm,
if you put something out there and then you have to take it back, then they know that hey, mom doesn't really mean it.
that's right.
mm,
She's gonna say it, but it's not gonna have any consequences. So you're right. If you put them on punishment, you got to be on punishment too.
And if
mhm,
you take that game away, I'm not talking about the video games. I'm speaking of if your child's in sports and you're saying you're not going to play in that game, you have to really mean you're not going to play in that game. And it's hard because you want to see them do well, and
Absolutely.
it's you really have to think through what you're doing. And I think it's okay as a parent if you're
mm,
still blessed to have your parents or you have someone that has similar values to you as a parent, even if you have a spouse or you don't have a spouse, reach out for help. Call someone and say, hey, can I run this by you? And a lot of times as you talk it through, you're like, whoa, okay, yeah, I was doing a little too much right there. That punishment was a little harsh. And run it through people that you trust to say, what would you do? Or
mm,
do you feel, is this as egregious as I think it is? Or am I overreacting because I'm taking it personal? And that's something that I think we have to do more as parents is it's okay to ask for help, get a
Absolutely.
resource, take a breath, you know,
Down.
before we just handle it in the moment. Everything,
Mhm.
if your child's in trouble at school, they're sitting in the office, they're okay. Take a breath, calm down, be willing and listen to what happened to your child, listen to your child, hear their side, allow them, that we just need to take some time, I think, and not
Mm.
be as reactive and be
Yeah.
open to getting advice from others.
I think
Yeah.
that is excellent. That is truly excellent. And I will say this thing about sometimes as parents, and I definitely have been guilty of this, my kids will say something, and because I'm so used to listening to adults, I'm going to, I believe the adult. But it's important that we know our child well enough and listen to them and understand that just because an adult said it, that doesn't mean that it is always the way that it happened.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, the react being reactive actually has also a big danger to it. Um, I mean, there's a dangerous element. Like almost 9 times out of 10, being reactive is gonna go wrong. I think very rarely could we react quickly and react rightly. But it can have a very dangerous element to it. You could react and be wrong, like you just mentioned, or you can react and you know, um, it can be physical, and now you've hurt your child in a way that you didn't want to do just because you're reacting. And our reaction, or just leaving, reactively, could also be teaching them
Absolutely.
how to be as adults. They can be adults who react, and when they get caught off in traffic, they're reacting, and everything is and as we know in this day and age, to react in that manner could find you in jail or someplace else. And we have to be very careful of what we're teaching by the way in which we're acting. So yeah, that's something that, and I know I'm guilty of it too, reacting, and at a drop of a hat, now that I'm tired, or I'm completely stressed, or it's been the end of a long day, now more in that spot where it's like, oh.
Absolutely. That's a very good point, Ruben. In order to be an intentional parent, you got to take care of yourself too. You
Mm,
Mhm.
have got to take intentional breaks so that, like Courtney said, reach out and hey, have your kids spend a play date with somebody else so that you can get a break. But
mm,
I think in order to be a good intentional parent, you got to take care of yourself, because
yeah.
when you do get tired, it is much easier. You're tired, you're overwhelmed. It's
Hmm.
just much easier to be reactive, and
Yeah.
it's usually not going to end well.
I
Yeah.
want to at this time, I know we're talking about intentional parenting and things. I think it's very easy, as a single person who's raising a child by themselves. If you have a niece or a nephew, or you are near your parents, like, help out your family, right?
Absolutely.
Like, they need support. It's very easy to get caught up in your family traditional life, like my kids, my wife, my kids, my husband. But
Mm,
parents, we're struggling out here because
hmm.
you don't get a break. You're dropping your kids off at 5:30 in the morning for practices. You're working till 4 or 5 in the day. They've got practice, they've got games. You're not getting home till 10 o'clock, and you're doing that 7 days a week, and you're exhausted. And no one has picked up the phone to say, "Hey, do you need anything? Can I can I take him to practice today so you can, just have a day to yourself?" It's hard, it's hard. And it's very difficult to remain intentional when you feel that, no one cares about what you're going through as a parent, right? Because you still have all of the decisions to make. You still got dinner, and you've got homework, and maybe you're
Mm,
dealing with behavior or attitudes, and it's very difficult. I think that we have to get to a space where we start supporting
Absolutely.
each other as parents. And I'm not saying, I'm not one to drop my son off places, but someone you trust, if you know someone that's genuinely a single mom or genuinely a single dad or a grandmother that's raising kids, check on them. Ask them, hey, like, hey, we're going to the park. Like, did you, you know, bring them over that, for a few hours and go get your nails done or go to the spa or just little things matter because and it does get to a point where your child, they do get older and but it doesn't get easier. I think raising older children is harder than raising younger children.
Absolutely. It
As
is.
your children get older, it's harder to be a parent,
Mhm.
and no one talks about the intentionality of, trying to be an intentional parent while, you know, trying to co-parent with hurt or who you're working through a divorce through or dealing with your own self trauma. It's hard. So I just think there's so many layers to being an intentional parent with growing through yourself, and but you have to take time. But for those single parents who can't take time, like you don't have you can't take it because you don't have the time to take, you
Mhm.
know, I will say to the parents that are in multiple parent households, or if you're an aunt or you're listening, or an uncle that's listening to this, check on them, call them, try to support them because they need it. And they really, really do. They really do.
That's
Mhm.
an excellent
Well
point.
said. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I'm off that soapbox. I think our next aspect, that really we could go into is, we talked about intentional parenting, those principles. We've looked at what is reactive parenting. So what do we think misconceptions of intentional parenting is? Like, what would you say is a misconception of being an intentional parent?
I guess maybe that you have to like focus in so hard all the time that it can't be fun, that it just that might be a misconception of intentional parenting. You can be both present and still enjoy your relationship with your children. I think you can still have fun with them, and that's a part of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think another one is that you have to be a perfect parent. And I'll be the first to say there is no perfect parent. I don't care whether you're in a two household or one household,
Mhm.
there's no perfect parent. And I think one of those conceptions is that you have to be a perfect parent. And I will say, just throw this little tidbit in there. I think one thing that as parents, everyone needs to learn to do is to apologize. We need to learn how to say, hey, honey, I didn't handle that well. This was going on and I just, I reacted. I didn't handle that well. Learn how to apologize to your kid. Because guess what? If your kid did something, you'd be the first one wanting them to apologize. So you have to learn as a parent to own that, hey, I messed that up. I'll try better next time. But definitely as a parent, learn how to apologize to your kid.
I think that's really good too. You definitely learning to apologize. I think a misconception that I would add is that, you it kind of goes along with what Brother Ruben was saying about, having fun, but you know, times are changing and it's okay for your children to not fit the mold. You know, if your child um goes down a path that you didn't necessarily feel like you wanted them to, it's okay for you to still love, support, continue to guide your child. You don't have to be overly spiritual to I think the spiritual aspect of raising children and being in the church and a lot of those things are just really changing now. And I think although it's really important to have that spiritual foundation, I think it's okay, for your child to enjoy some of those things, like being able to go to concerts and hang with their friends and do things and explore. And we don't want them just to go out and do everything, but I just think that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be, you know, well, it's a Sunday. You can't go to that baseball game. Well, I just think that we have to kind of continue to evolve and grow with the times of today and remain spiritually sound, but you don't have to suck the life out of like them, being a kid. I remember one of the things is like, oh, well, um, someone was saying, well, my child, you know, they have to cook what I eat. I guess maybe I'm different. Like, I don't want to eat at home, so we're not going to eat at home. It's okay for them not to eat everything on the plate. It's okay for your child, to want to do something different. And it's okay. I just think that we need to let go of some of the old school um, mindset. I mean, not the values, but just those rigid rules, you know, that kind of keep our kids, like we were saying earlier, they can't have a voice, they don't have a choice. They're not able to do things that allow them to, advocate for themselves. I think those are things that, might be a misconception that you're not being a good parent, if you're doing those things. So,
I think it's important as parents that we allow our kids to make mistakes or to do things. And if they make a mistake, they are still under our roof so that we can help them, talk them through. Okay, now why was this a bad decision? And what are some of the, now this is what happened, but what was worse that could have happened because you made this decision? I think it's important that you have to allow them to make mistakes while you can still guide them to correct them. Because otherwise, if you hold them so close that they never get to experience this or that, then when they do make a mistake, they can't recover from it. So
yeah. I think,
Ron,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think it's important too to just not compare your lifestyle to other families. What works for your family is great, and that's okay. Sometimes we get caught up in, what everyone else is doing, and it's not beneficial for what's best for our child, and it's okay if that looks different. I think that that's also something that, your child doesn't have to be in a specific school or be in a specific program. That doesn't mean you're failing as a parent or you're not being intentional because your child is, not doing as well in school, but you know that you're pouring in and you're giving your best effort. I think it's okay for you to genuinely, um, you know, set your own goals for your children, and it doesn't have to measure up to anyone. It's for you as a parent.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, kind of just thinking about what you were mentioning earlier, that that rigidity that we can sometimes have as Christians, that in a way we do have to be careful of that. I think we do have to be careful of trying to keep our children away from all the ills of the world, so much that they might as well be locked up in a tower somewhere.
absolutely.
But I feel like I think that the Bible has given us all that we need to know about parenting too. Uh, and if we were to get the word into our children, they'll have that as their armor as they continue to navigate throughout the world, which they do live in, because none of us are on an island anywhere. And they will have to go and graduate. They will have to go and enter the workforce. They will have to go and do and enter relationships and make their own choices. And so when they go, we want, well, for us, we want to make sure that we really did do what Proverbs says, train up a child, that we've given them all the tools. And then when they go, they have in their hearts and in their minds, honor your father and your mother, right? There's so many that the Bible already has that teaches us which way to go. Like, so I think that if we are training our children, just like it says in Proverbs, we are training them up and we're giving them, verses to go away with. that when they get into those spaces, like I remember, another one for Proverbs, I think, where, it was talking about if I think it was like a mother talking to her son saying, if they say to you, come on, we'll have great fun, we'll rob, we'll rob, we'll steal, we'll pillage, you know, those aren't the people you want to be around. And I'm thinking like, wow, yeah, that's in my mind as I'm making friendships. Those aren't the people I want to be around. And so I think all that we have is right there in the Bible. All that we need is right there in the Bible to send our children out. And that, when they are entering those spaces, they have those principles with them.
But Ruben, you're talking about intentional parenting again.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what you're talking about. You're
Got
talking
it.
about being present, having conversation, leading them in, God's word. You're talking about being intentional with, that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that we've had like this amazing conversation over intentional parenting today. And, I just really appreciate the different perspectives that we brought, to the table. And we really could go on for like a days about this topic. And, so I'm hoping that you all will join me again in the next, coming time to talk about a few more aspects. How do we address, behaviors in intentional parenting, gentle parenting versus intentional parenting? How do we continue to have self-care? What are just some ways that we can just continue to be the best version of parents um, for our children and, you know, just support each other as a whole, as we continue to grow in this journey, because it really is a journey, right? It's not something that we're going to figure out today or when your kids are 25. It's really something that is really something that we're going to continue to grow and talk through as we talk on this podcast.
I want to continue that conversation. So yeah. Let's do this again. Can I do this before I close? Can I read this one?
Absolutely.
Because I feel like we all need to absolutely get this, but it's Psalms 127:3, right? Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. So they're our gift. So we've been rewarded with children. So I think, I just wanted to read that and say that, hey, we gotta always remember that, like, hey, even when we are falling short or we are at our wits' ends, we still got to remember that they're a gift. So
Absolutely. I love that. That's really amazing. That's true. Like they truly are a gift from God. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Sister Hope, any last words as we close out this evening?
I just think it's really important. The time, it's like you blink your eyes, your little baby is grown, and, you know, regrets are real. So, it's good to start. It's not like, if you, like today, say if you already have a teenager, you've got maybe 3 or 4 years left to kind of help mold that child. So it's really critical that we really focus on this thing of being intentional as opposed to being reactive. And I don't think it's ever too late to learn how to say if your children are grown, it's not too late to go back and say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, I messed that up. You know, will you forgive me? And then start there and building that relationship back with that child. It's just critical that we be intentional in every aspect. And that looks different at all different ages. I mean, when you've got a little tiny one, you're thinking, I can't wait till they get a little older so I can be freed of this. But then they move to that difficult teenage stage, and that definitely is a difficult stage. And then they move to that college where they're out of your house stage. But it's just important at all stages to be intentional and thinking about your end goal. And I will say, I know for me, I had I think basically three goals for my children when they were growing up. I wanted them to love and honor God. I wanted them to go off to college and be able to care for themselves physically. And I wanted them to love their community and give back, not just take care of themselves, but to give back. And so to me, those three goals that I had for my children was what guided the decisions that we made regarding their schooling, regarding whether they went to church or not. That those goals were what guided the intentionality. Now, I didn't know back then that I was being an intentional parent. I just knew I had those goals and I wanted them to fulfill those goals. But now, that, I'm a little older and we're talking about this, I realized that it was intentional parenting.
Mm.
And I just think it's important at all stages to really think about what it is that you want your child to accomplish. And if you mess up, don't be too proud to go back and say, hey, I blew that. And this is one thing that my husband taught me was that, you know what, we messed today up, but guess what? Tomorrow's a brand new day. Let's dig in, let's start fresh. So, and I think that's okay. That's a great mindset to have.
And I just want to add that I think that it's important, to really work with them when they're young to build that relationship with your kids. Like that that age of, I would say, 5 to, because when they're younger, like younger than that, they really, I think kids start really remembering around 7, you know, but that young elementary, you know, age, once they start getting about 13, it's really hard to build, especially 15. It's really hard to build with your children if you haven't really been intentional and present with them. They really, especially this new generation of kids, they really thrive off of trust. Can they count on you? Can they trust your word? Um, are you being um are you holding yourself accountable?
Are
You
you
know,
being authentic?
authentic. Yeah, they're not that they're not the 85 babies, right? We're 40 this year. They're not us. These kids, they are truly looking at you to see, are you someone I can trust and count on? And it's hard to build that in those teen years. That trust is built before. And it's not saying that you can't build it, but it's hard. And you have to be really intentional about everything that you're doing to build that with them once they get to those teen years, because, you know, you're expecting to be able to trust them and to guide them, but they need to know that they can trust you in order to accept that guidance. And I think that's when we start getting into that struggle, and so I just want to say that I think it's really important to be intentional at all ages, but I really think it's intentional to be intentional parents as much as you can when you have them at an age where they are, I don't want to say they look at you and like revere you, but at that age is really when they really, really are really open to growing. Um, and you really have an opportunity to build those morals and those values, that spiritual foundation with them. It's hard to teach a 15, 16-year-old that, and they've been doing what they want to do for 15, 16 years. It's very difficult to change that tide. I'm not saying that you can't, but if you have the opportunity to build it before, try your best to be as intentional as you can, in those early years. Set boundaries, be consistent, and remain that way so that they you can continue to grow and guide them. Your formative years are definitely those early years. So,
Mm, well
yeah.
said.
Yes. So, but like I said, we could go on and on and on about little drops and nuggets of information. But our time is run out for today, this evening. But I really just appreciate the insight and what we've brought to the table today. And I really look forward to you, Sister Hope, and you, Brother Ruben, joining us again for the Family Matters podcast. We're going to remain on intentional parenting just for another few, maybe episodes or so. And if you're watching this podcast, we appreciate your time. We hope that you gained some nuggets of information and something that you can take back home to a friend or a soror or a fraternity brother or a church member, or spread the word so that they can learn about intentional parenting um, and continue to grow. Because really, it's really about building a strong spiritual foundation. And we want to build our families and our communities to where we are being intentional about each other and about our kids
Amen.
um,
Amen.
moving forward. So we thank you for your time tonight, and everybody join us next time. We hope you have a good night.